Revenge with Marvella. My sister's voice carried across the security checkpoint like she wanted everyone to hear. You're not authorized to be here, Vanessa said loudly, positioning herself between me and the guard station. She smiled while she said it, that specific smile she'd perfected over the years, the one designed to embarrass me in public while looking pleasant to observers. The morning sun glinted off the razor wire behind her. I was already holding my badge in my right hand, the plastic still warm from my pocket. The guard looked between us, clearly confused about why two women who shared the same last name and the same nose were having a confrontation at a classified government facility checkpoint at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning. Vanessa's smile widened. She thought she'd already won. The guard scanned my badge against the reader, and the screen flashed yellow instead of green. Secondary verification required, the automated voice announced through the speaker. Vanessa laughed, a sound that echoed off the concrete security barriers surrounding the gate. See? She doesn't work here anymore, she said to the guard, then turned to me with false sympathy. I tried to tell you, Claire. You should have checked before driving all the way out here. Other employees were lining up behind us now, waiting to get through security for the morning shift. I could feel their eyes on my back. The guard looked at my badge again, then at his screen. He didn't hand my badge back. Instead, he pressed a button on his console that I'd only seen used once before, during a security drill that turned out to be real. Step aside, ma'am, the guard said. For a moment I thought he meant me, but he was looking directly at Vanessa. His hand rested near his radio, not threatening but ready. You're blocking the security lane. Vanessa's smile faltered. I work here, she said, her voice rising slightly. I'm Director of Operations for the Advanced Systems Division. She's the one who doesn't belong. The guard remained unmoved. Step aside, please. That's when I realized this wasn't going the way Vanessa had planned. She moved to the left reluctantly, still close enough to watch but no longer directly in my path. The guard picked up his phone, the landline with the red stripe that meant secure internal communication. He spoke quietly into it, his eyes never leaving my badge. Within 90 seconds, a supervisor was walking toward us from the main building. 6 months earlier, Vanessa had replaced me at the company. Same defense contractor, higher title, better office with windows that actually opened. She'd told everyone I couldn't keep up with the evolving technical requirements of our division. At the company-wide meeting where they announced the leadership transition, she'd praised my foundational contributions in a tone that made them sound like ancient history. She'd positioned herself as the modern solution, the forward-thinking leader who understood contemporary defense systems. Our parents had been so proud. Their youngest daughter, the one who'd always been ambitious, finally getting the recognition she deserved. At that meeting, standing at the back of the conference room, I'd watched Vanessa sign the document that finalized my termination. Her signature had been confident, looping certain. What Vanessa didn't know, what nobody except 3 people in HR and my reassignment officer knew, was that I hadn't been fired. I'd been reassigned through channels so quiet they didn't leave the standard paper trail. The government doesn't terminate people with certain types of knowledge. They redirect them. Absorb them. Move them into positions where their expertise serves different purposes, often purposes that never appear on public organizational charts. My termination from the company had been real. My departure from government service had not. While Vanessa was celebrating her promotion and reorganizing my old department, I was going through a 3-month intensive training program at a facility that didn't appear on any maps. My clearance hadn't been revoked during my termination. It had been upgraded to a level that required biometric verification and approval from people whose names Vanessa would never know. The supervisor arrived with a tablet in his hand, the heavy-duty kind with the reinforced case that meant classified access. He scanned my badge himself, watched the screen, then frowned. He scrolled through something I couldn't see. His frown deepened. Then he scrolled again, slower this time, reading carefully. Vanessa stood to the side, arms crossed, waiting for vindication. The morning sun was getting warmer. More employees had gathered behind us, some checking their watches, others whispering to each other. The supervisor tapped something on his screen. Waited. then lifted my badge to the scanner a second time. The yellow light flashed again, but this time it was followed by a different sound, a soft chime I'd heard during my training. The supervisor's expression changed completely. He looked at me with something that resembled respect, then looked at Vanessa with something that definitely didn't. "There must be some mistake," Vanessa said, her voice losing its confident edge. "She was terminated 6 months ago for performance issues. She's exaggerating her credentials." The supervisor didn't respond to her. He was reading something on his tablet that required his full attention. Vanessa stepped closer, trying to see the screen. "I'm her supervisor." "Well, I was. I have the authority to verify her status." The supervisor finally looked up. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to lower your voice. This is a secure facility." His tone was professional but firm, the kind of firm that came from having actual authority rather than just a title. Vanessa's face flushed. She'd been told to lower her voice at her own workplace by someone who technically ranked below her in the organizational hierarchy. But security clearances create their own hierarchy, one that doesn't care about job titles or office sizes or who signs whose performance reviews. The guard made a call I'd heard only once before, during my final week of training. The tone changed immediately when whoever answered picked up. "This is Gate 7, the guard said quietly. "We have a clearance verification situation. Level designation Romeo 7 Alpha." There was a pause. "Yes, sir." Verified twice. Yellow flag transitioning to, "Hold on." He looked at his screen. Transitioning to blue protocol. Another pause. "Yes, sir." Both individuals present. He hung up and looked at the supervisor, who nodded once. My sister had stopped smiling completely now. She was watching the interaction with growing confusion, trying to understand a language she didn't speak. The other employees in line behind us were getting restless, but nobody complained. Something about the atmosphere at the checkpoint had shifted. People could sense when something unusual was happening, even if they didn't understand what. Vanessa had been methodical in how she pushed me out of the company. It had started 8 months before my termination, small comments in meetings about my traditional approach to problem solving. Suggestions that I was resistant to change when I questioned new protocols that seemed to ignore established safety standards. She'd framed me as unstable during a quarterly review, citing my emotional reactions to technical disagreements. She'd told our department director that I was outdated, that my knowledge was from a different era of defense systems, never mind that some of those systems were still in active use. She'd built a narrative, carefully and consistently, that I was a risk. A liability. Someone who needed to be managed out before I caused real problems. I'd saved every message. Every email where she'd undermined me. Every text where she'd coordinated with others to exclude me from meetings. Every performance review where she'd twisted my competence into incompetence. "Please wait inside," the supervisor said. He wasn't talking to Vanessa. He was talking to me. The words hung in the air for a moment while my sister processed what she'd just heard. "Inside," she repeated. "She's not cleared to go inside. I have her termination file. I signed it myself." The supervisor gestured toward the interior gate, the one that led past the main checkpoint into the secure compound. "Ma'am, if you'll follow me." He was still talking to me. The guard pressed a button, and the inner gate began to slide open with a low mechanical hum. Vanessa stepped forward. "Wait. There's been a mistake. I need to speak to someone in authority about this." The supervisor turned to her. "That's exactly what's happening." Then he walked through the open gate, and I followed him, leaving my sister standing outside with the guard and the growing line of confused employees. The holding room had glass walls and soundproofing, the kind of space designed to be simultaneously visible and private. I sat in one of the metal chairs while Vanessa argued outside with the guard, her mouth moving rapidly, her hands gesturing. I couldn't hear a word. The glass wasn't just thick. It was specialized, probably layered with materials that blocked sound and prevented certain types of surveillance. Through the transparent walls, I could watch the checkpoint activity continue around us like we were in a bubble outside normal operations. Other employees were being processed through the gates, their badges scanning green, their morning routines unchanged by whatever drama was unfolding in this separate space. A senior security officer entered the room without knocking, carrying a folder and wearing an expression that suggested he already knew everything he needed to know about this situation. The security officer sat down across from me and opened his folder without preamble. "I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer," he said. "During your time in the Advanced Systems Division, did your sister have access to files above her clearance level?" I'd been expecting this question since the moment the guard had scanned my badge the second time. I answered honestly. Yes. She accessed restricted technical specifications that required Romeo clearance. She had Charlie clearance. His pen moved across the paper. "Did you report this at the time?" I had. Through internal channels that apparently nobody had acted on, because Vanessa was senior leadership and I was just a technical specialist with concerns that could be dismissed as professional jealousy. "Yes," I said. 3 separate reports over 4 months. He made a note. "Do you have copies?" I did. Everything was backed up in 3 different locations, including one that Vanessa had never known existed. He started a formal incident report that would trigger automatic protocols. My clearance flag activated something automatic, something that couldn't be stopped once it started moving through the system. A compliance review triggered by the presence of someone with my specific clearance level having historical contact with someone operating above their authorization. The computers didn't care about family relationships or who had better job titles. They cared about classified information and who had touched it and whether proper protocols had been followed. The review was already running before I left the holding room, algorithms comparing access logs against clearance levels, matching timestamps to file downloads, flagging every inconsistency. Through the glass wall, I watched Vanessa being escorted away from the gate by 2 different security officers, not roughly but firmly, walking her toward a different building entirely. She looked back once, trying to see me, but the glass was one way from the outside. All she could see was her own reflection looking confused and angry. The silence that followed lasted 4 weeks. No calls from Vanessa. No texts asking what was happening or trying to explain her side. No apologies or attempts at reconciliation. Our mother called twice asking if we'd had a fight, if I knew why Vanessa seemed stressed. I said we'd had a disagreement at work, which was technically true, and that Vanessa would need to explain her own stress. The investigation notice went company-wide on a Thursday afternoon, a generic message about routine compliance review of access protocols that mentioned no names but specified the Advanced Systems Division. I heard through former colleagues that Vanessa had gone pale when she read it, that she'd left work early, that she'd spent the next 3 days working from home. The review board requested documentation going back 18 months. Every file access. Every authorization. Every instance where someone had opened something they maybe shouldn't have. They found timestamp discrepancies first. Files accessed at times when Vanessa claimed to be in meetings across the building. Policy shortcuts where she'd approved herself for temporary elevated access without going through proper secondary authorization. Unauthorized delegations where she'd given her credentials to subordinates to save time on routine processes that were routine specifically because they involved classified material. Every violation was small on its own, the kind of thing that might be excused as efficiency or good judgment or adapting to operational needs. Together, they formed a pattern. A pattern of someone who believed rules applied to other people, who thought her position meant she could cut corners, who'd convinced herself that classification levels were suggestions rather than legal requirements. All of it approved under her credentials. All of it traceable. All of it documented in systems she'd forgotten were watching. "Can you walk us through the original framework?" the lead investigator asked me during my second interview. We were in a different building now, one that required 2 separate badge scans and a biometric verification to enter. The access protocols for the Advanced Systems Division. How they were designed and why. I'd designed them. 5 years earlier, when I was senior technical architect, before Vanessa had been promoted above me, I'd built the entire security framework for how classified information moved through our division. Every level, every authorization chain, every backup protocol. I explained it for 90 minutes, drawing diagrams on the whiteboard, walking through scenarios, explaining the logic behind decisions that seemed bureaucratic, but existed for specific reasons. The investigators took notes, asked clarifying questions. Then one of them said something that changed the atmosphere in the room. "She doesn't understand any of this, does she?" They'd realized what Vanessa didn't know. That security protocols aren't obstacles to work around. They're the work itself. The leaked recording surfaced during week 3 of the investigation, uploaded anonymously to an internal company forum. Someone had recorded a leadership meeting from 4 months earlier, audio only, probably from a phone left running in a pocket. Vanessa's voice was unmistakable, talking about departmental changes with other directors. "Claire's clearance level is honestly a joke," she said, laughing. "Romeo 7 Alpha sounds impressive, but it's just bureaucratic inflation." She processed paperwork. "I'm doing actual strategic work." Other voices murmured agreement. She continued, "She's obsolete. The whole division will run smoother without her." The recording was 90 seconds long. By the time HR found it, it had been downloaded 47 times. By the time they took the forum offline, that number was over 200. Vanessa's access was frozen that afternoon, pending review. Her key card stopped working. Her login credentials were suspended. She called me for the first time in 4 weeks, but I didn't answer. I walked through the gate again on a Monday morning 3 weeks after the initial incident. Different guard on duty, but the same checkpoint, the same razor wire, the same concrete barriers. I held up my badge. He scanned it. Green light. No secondary verification. No supervisor called. No holding room. Just the smooth mechanical hum of the inner gate opening and me walking through into the compound like I'd done it 1,000 times before, because my clearance was exactly what it claimed to be and the system knew it. Different building this time, different office, different responsibilities. But the same badge, the same authority, the same clearance level that Vanessa had mocked as bureaucratic inflation. I heard later that she'd tried to enter the facility that same morning, arriving 15 minutes after I did. Her badge no longer worked. The system didn't give her a yellow light or a secondary verification. It gave her red, the color that means denied, rejected, removed from access entirely. The family dinner happened because our mother insisted, because she couldn't understand why her daughters weren't speaking and needed us to work it out like adults. Vanessa showed up 20 minutes late, her face tight with anger she was trying to control. We made it through appetizers before she confronted me directly. "You sabotaged me," she said across the table, ignoring our parents' attempts to redirect the conversation. "You must have. There's no other explanation for how this happened." She listed her evidence, the investigation starting right after I showed up at the gate, the timing of the leaked recording, the way everything fell apart so quickly. Our father tried to intervene. Our mother looked like she might cry. I set down my fork and told Vanessa the truth, speaking clearly so she'd have to hear every word. "I never touched your files. I never spoke to anyone about you unless directly asked by investigators. I never had to sabotage you." I paused. "You sabotaged yourself." The final review board didn't ask for opinions or personal statements or explanations of intent. They reviewed evidence, documents, access logs, testimony from technical experts about what the protocols required and what Vanessa had actually done. The hearing lasted 6 hours. I wasn't required to attend, but I was allowed to observe from a separate room via video feed. Vanessa sat with her lawyer, trying to explain each violation as a misunderstanding or an efficiency measure or a gray area that she'd interpreted in good faith. The board members listened without expression. They'd seen the pattern. They'd read the reports. They'd heard the recording where she'd called security classifications a joke. When they delivered their finding, it took less than 5 minutes. The violations demonstrate a fundamental lack of understanding of classified material handling requirements. Ms. Vanessa Chen's role is deemed a security liability. Immediate reassignment pending corrective action. Her clearance was downgraded. Her director title was removed. The finding was final. The demotion was public because these things always became public in organizations where people talked. Vanessa was reassigned to a position that didn't require clearance above baseline level, working on unclassified procurement documentation in a different building entirely. No direct reports. No strategic authority. No access to anything that mattered. The announcement went out through official channels on a Friday afternoon, the standard time for news companies wanted to bury. But it didn't get buried. Too many people had heard about the investigation, had seen the leaked recording, had wondered why the director of Advanced Systems Division was suddenly absent from meetings. By Monday morning, everyone knew. Vanessa finally asked me how I did it during a brief encounter in the parking lot outside the building she now worked in, her voice small in a way I'd never heard before. She actually wanted to know what steps I'd taken, what strings I'd pulled, what revenge I'd planned. I didn't do anything, I told her, and it was the complete truth. I explained it carefully because she genuinely didn't understand. I'd kept my records clean, followed every protocol exactly, documented every concern through proper channels. I'd maintained my clearance by respecting what it meant rather than treating it as a status symbol. I'd built systems that worked correctly and then trusted those systems to function as designed. When she'd violated protocols, the systems had noticed. When she'd accessed files above her clearance, the logs had recorded it. When she'd mocked security classifications, someone had been recording. I hadn't needed to orchestrate anything. I just needed to exist in the same organization where she was breaking rules she didn't think applied to her. Vanessa started crying in the parking lot, tears running down her face while other employees walked past pretending not to notice. I didn't comfort her. I just waited for her to finish. The offer came through official channels 2 weeks after Vanessa's demotion, a formal letter from someone senior enough that their signature required verification. They asked me to stay with the organization, but in a different capacity. Different department entirely, one that existed in organizational charts, but whose actual function was need to know. Higher clearance, more responsibility, work that couldn't be discussed even with family members who had basic government clearances. The salary was better. The title was intentionally vague. The opportunity was exactly what I'd been training for during those 3 months, when everyone thought I'd been terminated. I accepted on my terms. No publicity, no announcements, no company-wide emails about my new role. Just a quiet transition into work that mattered more than titles or office windows, or making sure people knew I was important. The kind of work where competence spoke louder than credentials, where authority came from knowledge rather than hierarchy. I passed through the gate one last time before my transfer to the new facility, my badge scanning green without hesitation, the guard waving me through with barely a glance because my clearance was exactly what the system expected it to be. Vanessa was waiting outside the checkpoint that morning, not in line for entry, but standing by the visitor parking area like she'd been hoping to catch me. I saw her through the reinforced glass as I walked past. She wasn't trying to enter anymore, wasn't arguing with guards or demanding to speak to supervisors. Just standing there, watching people go in and out of a facility where she no longer belonged. She wouldn't meet my eyes when I looked toward her. Just stared at the ground, at her phone, at anything except the sister who'd walked through security while she stood outside, at the clearance level she'd called a joke, at the authority she'd thought she could talk her way past. The moral wasn't complicated, though Vanessa had needed months of consequences to start understanding it. Clearance isn't about titles or who sounds more confident in meetings or who can smile convincingly while undermining someone. It's about trust, earned slowly and lost quickly, verified by systems that don't care about family relationships or personal ambition. It's about respecting the difference between what you're authorized to know and what you want to know, between following protocols because they matter and following them because someone's watching. Authority doesn't argue. It doesn't need to raise its voice or make threats or prove itself in confrontations at security checkpoints. It just verifies, quietly and thoroughly, checking credentials against reality until the truth becomes unavoidable. Vanessa had tried to stop me at the gate because she'd believed her position meant more than my clearance. The guard had checked my credentials twice not because he doubted them, but because what they showed was so far above what she'd claimed that he'd needed to verify he was reading correctly. She'd built her authority on titles and confidence and the assumption that systems would bend for people who projected enough certainty. I'd built mine on knowledge and protocols and the quiet understanding that real authority doesn't need to announce itself. It just opens gates.